Hi, everyone. A Automation in Action podcast. I'm sitting here with Jeff Jatcko, the VP of Sales for Blue Ridge, and Ken Carpenter, the Chief Product and Strategy Officer for Blue Ridge. Wanted to kind of introduce these two fellas. We got introduced to Blue Ridge through our beverage distribution model where we needed actually one of our customers reached out and they wanted to integrate Blue Ridge into a system called VIP. Gary Grunwald, who we had on the podcast previously, kind of introduced us to these folks. Blue Ridge demand planning software, obviously with Gen AI, and one of the biggest pieces to Gen AI is predictive analysis, and that kind of goes right into demand planning and some of the things Blue Ridge does. So I want to introduce Jeff and Ken. Thanks and welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having us, Brent. Happy to be here.
Yeah, wonderful. So I know, Ken, you were also being the chief product strategy officer. You were also head of channels at some point, had a lot of experience there as well. And kind of dig into that a little bit later in terms of channels and where you guys are selling and kind of what makes you unique. And I know, Ken, I think you're out of the Utah area. I saw Brigham Young, so I assumed Utah. Is that
It's a good
still the case?
question. Yeah, so I'm a twice offender of Brigham Young University. So I did my undergrad and my MBA both there at Brigham Young. So shout out to the Cougars. But actually, I'm not far from Utah. I'm in Little Utah, otherwise known as Arizona. And
Little Utah. I never heard that
yeah,
referred to as that way.
yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of folks that are from Utah that end up in Arizona or had family many years ago that settled in Arizona, and so uh, in
So it's
the
like 120 degrees there right now and in the shade.
we're
Well,
baking
Hot
it's a
sun,
dry
right?
heat, right? It's a dry heat.
very dry heat with those monsoons bringing the humidity. Yeah, no, that's the little unknown thing is the humidity comes in with those monsoons and it makes it so bad. Yeah, we
Oh
just stay
man,
indoors during the summer.
that's funny. We're the complete opposite. We stay indoors in the winter, and you stay
Yep.
indoors in the summer. And Jeff, from the hot Atlanta area, Georgia Bulldog. I think they were national champions this year, right? Is that-
No, not this year, but the 2 years prior. So back to
Okay.
back in 21, 22, but not 23.
You a Stetson Bennett fan or?
Oh, love Stetson. Love Stetson. I
You
mean,
gotta love that name. Any
that
guy with Stetson as their first name. That's a hell
yeah.
of a name.
Sometimes some parents might know what the future holds, right? When you have a
Right.
kid with a name like
I mean, your
Stetson,
kid's
he's got to be
cool.
a quarterback.
Your kid's immediately cool if he's Stetson. So, well, I want to kind of introduce Blue Ridge to kind of the world. Not that our podcast reaches that far, but can you guys maybe, I don't know who wants to start, but kind of share a little bit on like Blue Ridge, how you came to be. Maybe start there and kind of what niche did you fill at the time?
Jeff, why don't you take that since you're the elder statesman from Atlanta?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really, if you go back to what many of us would call, and I wasn't there, but Blue Ridge 1.0. We had a group of founding employees that were ex E3 employees that were part of the organization when E3 was acquired by JDA, which has now been acquired by Blue Yonder.
Okay, Blue
And
Yonder, yeah.
they saw a need for solutions like E3, really weren't happy with the culture of a JDA after that acquisition. So some would say they got the band back together and started this kind of grassroots bootstrap organization that was Blue Ridge, where we were doing a lot of education around best practices of buying, training E3 users as we started to develop our suite of applications. And actually the first iteration of the product itself was based on supply chain planning for the food service space, right? So high service level demands, very small margins, and that's really driven the philosophy of the organization from day one. And of course, we've then expanded the verticals and the focus that we've had from food service distribution into other adjacent verticals in wholesale distribution like wine and spirits and beverage distribution, then into the hard goods space with automotive aftermarket, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, consumer product goods. And now, as we've continued to iterate and grow as an organization, we're pushing back into the manufacturing space and into the specialty retail space. So
So
I've
you
been
mentioned
17 years in business, I think.
Yeah, and you mentioned JDA and E3, and I'm not familiar. I assume those are demand planning. I heard Blue Yonder. I know they're on the top of the Gartner Magic or whatever the quadrant is. Um, uh, Interesting. So were those other players not doing those niche oriented like food service? They were focused more on like supply chain or something. Was that a
I,
niche underserved?
I think the distribution, wholesale distribution market in general has been underserved since
Hmm.
products like E3. JDA had plans for retail, manufacturing, et cetera. And that's really where Blue Ridge, I think, kind of made its mark, was being purpose built for that wholesale distribution space and then expanding from there. That's kind of what our niche was in the first iteration of the solution.
And so, how long did it take? I mean, obviously, I've been in two bootstrap startups, so to speak. I know it takes a long time to ramp up a bit. And then obviously revenue's king at that point where you need to drive some revenue to keep the lights on. Well, what did, I guess, when did you guys start and what was your first
So
customer?
organization founded in, I think, incorporated in 2007, and then our first customer hit
Oh,
2008.
okay.
Um, we were completely bootstrapped until I want to say 2015 when we had some investment by a small cap fund. Um, and then more recently here I think it was August of 21, Ken, or 22, that the
21.
acquisition of Blue Ridge by Great Hill Partners took place.
Okay. So you're PE owned?
Yep.
Correct.
PE.
Interesting. Yeah, it's going to help with development. Certainly, it's hard to scale development, right? When you don't have enough cash. Curious, Blue Ridge, Blue Yonder. Do it have any? It seems like most of the industry starts with blue. Is
No,
that
no,
a?
actually, that's a good question. So the actually original name of the company was Intrinsic Value,
Oh,
and
okay.
I don't know that that really spit off of the tongue as anything that would resonate. And as I understand it, and I wasn't present on this flight, but a couple of the founders were flying back from a meeting, an on-site meeting
JetBlue.
with no, no,
Maybe.
close. You're
Oh.
getting closer, but they were flying over the Blue Ridge Mountains, which are located just north of
Ah,
Atlanta, right? So between Atlanta and the Tennessee North Carolina border, you see the Blue
Blue
Ridge Mountains,
Ridge.
and
Yeah.
flying over those mountains, that was kind of the impetus for the group to say, how about this as a name change?
I love that. I love that. I
Yeah,
love the history of like a name. Like we're PIF, Professional Image Filing. In 1996, it was around imaging and file cabinet replacement, right? So now we're putting information first. So you can, with an
there you
acronym,
go.
you can kind of pivot.
Exactly.
Kind of
Yeah,
adjust it on the fly.
right. So I guess, for Ken here, from a product standpoint, I see there's so many apps, like kids today, they're playing Siege and Call of Duty, and before I know it, they're playing some. Um, my kids, they're gamers, so to speak, but they're playing some game from like 15 years ago. Like there's some like nostalgic piece to it. So there's so many different apps out there, and a lot of the ERPs have certainly added like demand planning. And I know VIP, which there's VIP, Vermont Information Processing. It's an ERP that is in the beverage distribution space is very popular, and there's a longer story there, certainly from a family perspective. I know, but you know, how do you differentiate and from a product perspective? And I think Jeff, I'll come to you after. And like, how do you differentiate from a sales perspective? Like a lot of ERPs have this type of technology in it now. I mean, BI and analytics is kind of similar. I would say you can probably do the demand planning as part of the BI tool. What what makes you unique in that way?
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, kind of getting back to little historical roots, right? Supply chain planning in the modern era has existed for almost what, maybe more than 40 years. right?
Mm.
As far as the process itself, the core math associated, right, with how you're going to start optimizing supply chains, right? These were all scientific components that were starting to be popularized in the 60s and 70s, right? And so as those processes began to start to be digitized, you started to have, great companies pop up like E3 as an example, right? Or others from an ERP standpoint starting to take their shots at it, or big giant consolidations, right? Companies buying companies, right? In the case of JDA Blue Yonder, right, where they've over time acquired a bunch of little smaller technologies within the supply chain planning space and pieced those together to provide, other areas that we don't play in, like transportation management or some of these other components, right? And they're not the only one, right, within that sea. But what I think what's interesting is about Blue Ridge and why we're different from the ERP, or why we bring some extra capability or thought to this whole process, is that supply chain planning, despite the math being there, is still very difficult to execute, right? And supply chain planning is complex in the sense that you have to have the right data, you got to be able to interpret the data, and then you got to run that data algorithmically through the forecasting engine or other subsequent processes in order for it to have any value within what you're trying to do. And if you don't do those workflows in the right way, or you don't have the right data to be able to pull into those workflows to get an output, then you're going to end up with a really bad process. And in the case of our customers, uh, if you do it wrong, you're going to end up buying totally wrong, and you're going to have a whole bunch of inventory sitting on hand, or not enough inventory sitting on hand, and you're going to end up with lost sales. And that all translates to real dollars that are either going out the window and flying away, or dollars that are sitting tied up that you can't turn into cash, right? And so this is why Blue Ridge is important, is that we make that complexity a lot more simple for the customer by giving these workflows and giving these directions and giving our degree of forecast accuracy that is above and beyond what an ERP is traditionally going to provide to you, right? An
So it's like a
ERP,
bundled, it's like a almost like a bundled use case kind of
yeah,
toolkit.
yeah.
Okay.
Call it like a series of use cases that have been built up over a very long time, right? And so you have all these minor use cases that get built into a feature, and then it gets built into the Blue Ridge platform. And then over time, you have a significant amount of functionality that a customer is going to use above and beyond an ERP.
I
So
think
like,
one
yeah.
thing that Ken pointed out there is the execution point, right? There are a lot of systems that can do some great math, but what I like to call the elegant simplicity that we use to then offer up recommendations for actions and the workflows that they take and leverage in Blue Ridge on a daily basis. That's one of the things that makes us really unique.
And so that's perfect. But like in a like say all those BI tools, like MicroStrategy, for instance, like I assume it has
Mhm,
some demand planning in there, right? With, I mean, it's all
mhm.
predictive analysis, but to your point, you're saying, hey, listen, we understood these 10 use cases, whatever they are. We've kind of cookie cutted them so you can probably go to market quickly versus kind of a platform play where it's like, hey, you can buy the platform, you can build whatever you want, but it's going to be a pain in the butt to do so. Is that kind of your secret sauce? Yep.
Well, I think to your point, right, and I think we're indexing a little bit on the forecast piece, right, is forecasting is just the tip of the process, right, for the customer that is going through, and they're trying to essentially plan out how they're going to proceed with their operations, right? So it's this whole concept of S&OP, right? So strategic sales and operations planning, right? And so when you start with the forecast, yeah, I mean, I could take a calculator and an Excel spreadsheet and I could generate a forecast, right? I could look at trend, I could do a moving average, I could do a whole bunch of different things, right? And that's typically what an ERP is mostly doing, right? Is they're going and they're looking at your sales history, and then they're applying some simple math like a moving average to then give you what they think, right, the next period's demand is going to be, right, from a forecast perspective. And then it stops there, right? And it says, okay, well, based on that, go insert a buying process as part of that whole piece. And while that's okay, right, and that'll probably give you what, 80% forecast accuracy, 85% forecast accuracy, right? That usually isn't sufficient for customers that are trying to grow their business, right? And so what we try to do is that we give the customer a whole bunch of different algorithms or advanced math that is going to get that forecast accuracy from a realistic standpoint up to 90 to 97% forecast accuracy over the life of what we're trying to do for that customer, which allows them to plan at a much more granular level and allows them to plan more accurately as well, right? And so that is, on the forecast perspective, that is the very first difference, right, that we
Yeah.
provide to the customer. Outside of, forget the ERPs or anything else, but that first step is we want to make sure that you have a good idea of predicting the future of what your business is potentially going to do based on past history.
Interesting. So in terms of like, I guess supply chain, right? I mean, you got
Yep.
Amazon. I mean, let's go back in time 20 years. I mean, demand planning, and again, I don't know all the different components of it. You might need to actually,
No,
why don't we
you're
start
totally
there?
good.
What are like this software you do? It's more than just, as you said, like the scheduling. Like, what are the components of it? What are like, is it, or you have a data model set with the different, algorithms, but like, if you were to onboard somebody, what are like the five step or the five components of what you are? And I say five, whatever it is.
Yeah, for sure. Jeff, why don't you start and then I'll chime in.
Yeah, so I think one thing that's important to think about is, Ken was talking about forecast, and that's really just the tip of the iceberg. Now,
Right.
getting the forecast right is incredibly important, but there are all of these other subcomponents that go into the effective execution of supply chain planning or supply chain management. Things like, how are you calculating safety stock? What are it's how do you take that forecast and then convert on that from an execution standpoint, right? Because the whole goal of that forecast is to get the right supply in to meet demand, right? So, how do you calculate things like order cycles on the most profitable time to order said product? How do you calculate big savings components like safety stock? Many of the people we talk to, because of what Ken mentioned with kind of this simple moving average approach, they tend to say, oh, we keep 4 to 6 weeks or 2 months of supply. That's fine, but what's the logic behind that? So, statistically calculated scientific safety stock that goes into this process. How do you factor all of the order policies from the suppliers or from the manufacturers that they're getting supply from? So there's all of these other subcomponents that go into the execution of what to order and when to order that go on top of the forecast. And that's really where I'll call it the magic happens, is
Interesting.
with all of those other factors.
So these customers have different methodologies by which they collect their data. And if you just collect that data without understanding the methodology or the rules behind that data, could obviously, not everybody does things the same way. So what you're saying is basically you got to dig into the actual root cause of the data, to be able to accurately create all the steps necessary to get to the forecast, I think is what you're
Well,
saying.
I mean, another way to say it is we have to live in the real world, right? So it would be nice if you could calculate a forecast and just buy whatever you need, but sometimes it's not that simple, right? Sometimes you've got constrained supply from the supplier. Uh, you've got a lot of factors that go in those order policies, right? I
All
only need
right.
$1,000 worth of product, but the supplier says I'm not sending you anything unless you place an order of $2,000 or more, right? And managing all of those factors manually, which is what a lot of people who are leveraging ERPs in particular have to do, is they're supplementing that with a lot of spreadsheet work and then pulling
Mm.
data from BI systems. So they're pulling data from all of these different points, trying to bring it into a spreadsheet, making some decisions, and then pushing that data back into the ERP or other systems where they then have the third challenge of executing upon that, right?
Right, which is
So,
ordering, right? So you actually do the ordering, and I've seen that, right? I've seen you
correct.
push a PO, what a PO to the supplier should be at, and how much. I've seen that with VIP in the case of Pine State. So that's also a component of it, right? Of what you provide, which is we'll do the analysis, but then we'll also create the order so you don't have to do so.
I mean, the idea is
Exactly.
to get the supply planners, the replenishment planners out of the weeds and begin managing their business by exception, right?
Is that an ops?
Um,
Is that an ops thing? A supply planner? I guess I'm not
some
in
of
the
that
supply
will
chain.
depend upon the markets that you're serving, right?
Right.
So in wholesale distribution, you hear buyer
Or
or
yeah,
replenishment buyer. And that
procurement,
role in the
purchasing. Yeah.
wholesale distribution business usually is doing forecasting and purchasing, right? You move into some other markets, retail and especially manufacturing, you get a separation between a demand planning team and then a supply planning team that's really doing replenishment, but they tend to sit in separate organizations or departments in a manufacturing org.
Interesting.
So some of it's just terminology and verbiage depending on the market you're in.
Right. So I guess, in addition to all the algorithms and the kind of specialized use case, you have the ordering piece, which gets pushed back into the ERP, which gets, you don't have to work off of disparate, Excel spreadsheets and dealing with all that kind of stuff. And then all the data stays in a database, so to speak, that you don't have to deal with disparate Excel spreadsheets. So makes sense.
Yeah.
Now
And
from a
and and that margin of error, right? One misplaced decimal or digit in that spreadsheet can have some pretty catastrophic results downstream.
Right, and you're doing all sorts of validation, right, against that
Hmm.
particular supplier, and can you order this much? And there's all sorts of rules, I guess you could set that would also allow you to get very supplier specific.
Well,
Very neat.
and if a user has a question, all of the detail components are there, right? They don't have to go into the detail in order to approve orders. But if there seems to be something unusual about what we're presenting, we're not a black box. They have the ability to see all of that logic that we use to convert the forecast into an order.
Interesting. So it gives you kind of like a summary of the math or something like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
really. Oh, that is
yeah.
cool. Like here's our cost justification for this order. Okay, interesting. That
Yep.
I think that's probably unique too. I mean, I guess I don't really know the space, right? I mean, is demand planning kind of software? Is that the name of this space, or is it
Yeah. I mean,
inventory
demand
control
planning is a
management? Like,
component.
okay,
Yeah, demand
yeah,
You hear a lot of vernacular for this space, right, Ken?
Yeah, I mean, really, I think that the holistic name is supply chain planning, right? That encapsulates both demand and supply,
supply
um,
chain. Yeah.
or supply chain operations planning, right? Goes by SCIPO in a fancy way of saying it, right? If you want to blend the algorithm together or the the letters together, but anyways, long story short is that to Jeff's point, right? Really what we do is we do the demand planning, we take that forecast and we blend it into a supply plan, and that supply plan then gets executed as a buying strategy for the buyers, right? And then that whole end-to-end process is super powerful because it affects real dollars for the company, affects profit, affects revenue, um, affects the operational constraints, right? So if you think about a manufacturer, or even just a distributor that has to manage warehouses, right? One of their biggest challenges right now is people, right? Being able to staff the warehouse, being able to, how many people do I need on any given day, right? We're going to give them visibility as to their ordering cycles and also the lead times for all the inventory that's coming in so that they can appropriately probably staff up and make sure that there's enough people on hand to break down those orders or to repack those incoming inbound shipments. so that they're ready to then obviously execute business, right, against the service level that they're trying to
Yeah,
achieve for their
part of the
customer.
ROI's got to be headcount reduction because you get all
Yeah,
those buyers on spreadsheets and really don't need them. You basically can use a level of AI to kind of replace that probably lower value work. I guess now that distribution is so, transportation's so different now. I mean, Amazon's got distribution centers everywhere, just in time, versus, ordering bulk inventory and then all the costs associated with holding too much inventory, which I know about a little bit about. Like, I mean, 20 years ago, could you even do this given, well, let's just say during the internet stage, could you even do it? Because distribution was so distributed, meaning is like there
hmm
weren't there weren't hot centers and where FedEx is, based out of Memphis, and if you and you have these different distributions, so you can get goods that are in supply, quickly now. I mean, Amazon does 1 day deliveries. Like, is this more important now than it was prior?
Mhm. I would say yes, right? Because you no longer compete locally, right? Even in a wholesale distribution
Yeah,
business. So most of these businesses started as family-owned businesses that were supplying a service to a local area,
to a
right? And then,
retail like store,
right,
right? And there's no
very much
store
so.
anymore.
And then they grew over time, and then they start adding other lines, right? And then they get to a point, well, we're maximized here in terms of our regional reach. Let's acquire another family-owned business. And so they've grown by acquisition in a lot of cases, but now they're starting to compete, yes, much more outside of just their local
Globally.
physical
Yeah.
market where you could drive or walk to a location, right? And we've even seen some of those who've converted this into more digital businesses, right? E-com type businesses for distribution, HVAC parts via e-com, things of
hmm
that nature. So one of our founders would talk about the Amazon effect all the time. I need it now. I need it now. I need it
Right.
now. So, when Ken was talking earlier about the work that a buyer has to do in our system, the nice thing is this all aligns back to the corporate strategies for things like fill rate, right? And so the recommendations are aligned not only with the buyer's job, but what the company's trying to achieve to drive top end revenue, avoid customer drain, et cetera. So I think it's just a fundamentally different landscape than we had 20
That
years
people
ago, or
buy
than needed
online,
20
right?
years ago. Yeah.
hmm
Yeah. I mean, you don't go to a CompUSA and buy a computer anymore, right? Or what was Circuit
No,
City or something? All
it's
those are
funny you
gone.
mentioned
Yeah.
that. I actually had to go to a Staples about a month ago because we were going to do a QBR and we needed one of those post-it flip charts to stick to the wall. And I thought the same thing. When is the last time I've gone into, an Office Depot or a Staples
Yeah.
to pick something up?
I think I got envelopes maybe because I was right next door at the supermarket. But yeah, I mean, I haven't really been to a bank either. Like, just the
Yeah,
nature of inventory supply within a retail store versus now with, now kind of attached to that, now you have also inflation, right? So current
Mhm.
economic type factors like pressures, like people, things are more expensive. Maybe people are buying less because they don't want to spend 30% more on whatever. Where does that come? Are companies more uh, apt to engage with a Blue Ridge because of those current economic type factors?
absolutely. I think you've highlighted and touched on a couple of these things, right, in the beginning of this part or this interesting piece of the conversation is that if you looked back probably 25 years ago, kind of pre 2000, after 2000, you had companies get really good at just in time or get really good at controlling their inventory levels. And then all of a sudden, you have some major disruptions like COVID, for example. or other supply chain disruptions like with the war between Ukraine and Russia, or the
Hmm.
blockage of the Suez Canal, or some of these different things that are unanticipated and major supply chain disruptions.
Yeah, you
And
couldn't
then
get
all of a
wheat
sudden,
out of Ukraine, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
you can get anything, right? Yeah, or the oil challenges, right, from the pipeline disruptions, right? Or just literally you could not ship, you had to ship goods because the blockage of the Suez Canal. You then had to go through down past the Cape of
right around,
Africa, right,
right?
and then go back up, right? And so your lead times went from whatever, call it a week to 3 months, right? It made it so impossible for these companies to be able to run their business super lean. And so as a response, a lot of companies have just said, you know what, I'm going to carry as much inventory as possible, right? But then, kind of to your point, you get then some inflationary
Hold, yep.
issues where
Holding
containers
charges,
are more
yep.
expensive, right?
Hmm.
Holding charges. Do I need more warehouse? Like, do I have to spend $1 billion on warehouses, right? If I'm a large enterprise, because I have to carry so much more goods. Or in the case of like an Amazon or others that want to do same day fulfillment, imagine how much inventory they have to carry just in case you click a button and you want something in 12 hours, right? Or in 4 hours, right? And so these systems are only becoming more important because we have to do a better job of predicting all these different interconnected pieces. And that's what's great about modern supply chain planning systems, is that we're able to workflow this out and make it simple for the buyer, and help them in that whole process to make sanity right out of all these different components.
Yeah, I mean, look at, I mean, Amazon, right? I mean, I mean, they must use something like you, but they probably internally developed it. I would assume that you can go on a website, anybody throughout the world know how long it's going to take to get to you, how many are left, and a lot of them are like other stores that aren't even their inventory. Well, I think they have to ship it to their distribution center. So I mean,
Yep.
I don't know. We're in New Hampshire. I can tell you you go along the highways, there's huge new buildings. I mean, as long as you could see of these distribution centers, it obviously they're trying to spread inventory so they're more regionally available. Are you seeing that with yours? Like, in certain states, do you get very regionally focused in terms of demand? And like, if you're in the Northeast, people drink a lot of beer and hot dogs on the summer. And like, does does that like seasonal kind of thing
100%.
come into? Yeah,
All that comes into play.
100%. Right.
yeah,
And
it's
Yeah.
and sometimes that's based upon the market, the vertical, and then the regionality. So it's interesting you mentioned that I had a conversation with a wine and spirits distributor that's in the mid Atlantic, and they said July, it's way quiet for us because everybody in the Philadelphia area is at the shore, right? So everybody
that
goes
might
away
make
on
sense. Yeah,
vacation and the business changes just slightly for that month. So they have to factor that component, is that in the city itself, there are not as many shoppers going into the retail markets,
makes
right?
sense.
They're hitting the package stores closer to the coast just from a volume standpoint,
Interesting.
right? So there are all of these subtleties that come into play that show up in the algorithms when we're managing the business.
And clearly you guys, I mean, you've been in business since '07, so you have a long, almost 20 years of historical data probably for those vertical markets, right? Um, I wonder, like that data is almost more valuable than the software, like just the historical trending data. It's
Our
interesting.
customers love the data, right? So if you think about some of our long customers that have been with us for 7, 8 years, right, or more, they have hundreds of reports that they've built off of the data that's been created within the system, right? And it becomes so embedded to what they're trying to do from an operational perspective that, again, data is their oil, right? That's what gets their business moving, right? And operationally, they can't have hiccups in regards to that. And so that's one critical aspect of that from a data standpoint. And then, I mean, I think another interesting thing is we mentioned the Amazon effect previously, and just in the last piece, what's interesting is that Amazon doesn't, they just facilitate kind of the move of goods, right? So they don't necessarily, in most cases, when they're working with all their different vendors, they don't have to really anticipate demand so much as they need to anticipate how to actually fulfill, right? And so they have a bunch of different systems, like you mentioned, through Amazon's web portal, right? Through the shop. They have some systems that are not supply chain planning specific, but to your point, they're helping facilitate the transaction for those shops that are selling on Amazon. And then they have their big giant warehouses that are all over the place, right? To help facilitate an easy movement or fulfillment of goods across the supply chain network. But where it's valuable from a supply chain planning standpoint is that we're helping in taking the sales data that then Amazon sends back to their vendors, and then their vendors are giving us that sales data, and then we're helping make sure that those vendors facilitate enough goods to Amazon so that they can fulfill those customer orders, right?
Oh, so you do get some of that order data from Amazon for
Not directly, it's more
not
indirectly through the actual
indirectly.
customer,
That's
right?
interesting. I'd
Yeah,
love to see what that Amazon data looks like. I mean, I c-
yeah,
but for somebody to be able to buy it in 2 days and prime shipping,
yep,
they've got to be able to keep track of that inventory and then know how long it takes to get to you and then be
for
able,
sure.
but it's probably not doing the demand piece, which is, you're going to need, a lot more of these units on hand, to your point. So it's more of
Yeah,
a kind of a transaction to delivery type, thing.
And and Ken, tell me
100%.
what you think of this. I think there's a fundamentally different challenge for an Amazon than the traditional distribution customer
Yeah,
because due to the fact that there's the AWS business that backs Amazon, they don't have the same financial challenge that many of our
Yeah.
customers face, right? So to Ken's point, they can afford to carry extra inventory because there's this whole AWS animal that backs them financially, right?
Right. They don't have to pay
Uh,
for that component, right?
and they just have a little larger margin for error, right? But when you're talking about a regional or a national distribution business that has heavy competition but not all of that financial backing, it becomes a fundamentally different story for that customer.
Yeah, I see that a
right.
lot in our intelligent document processing software. So the Abbeys, the Kofaxes of the world, they have to be on some cloud, like whether it's Google or AWS or Azure. Whereas Azure's now an IDP player, they do capture now, but it's a fraction of the cost because they're Azure. They don't have to host anywhere. They don't have any of the, I mean,
Yeah.
they're just part of
Right.
that. And so I don't know how a company that tries to compete with an Azure or Google, how they even can. I mean, innovation wise, I know they can't. And I also know from a dollar perspective, they can't. I mean,
Certain markets
AWS
they
makes,
can't,
they can't.
right?
It's
Yeah.
interesting. It's almost a monopoly from that perspective because all software at this point you need. I mean, you could get a server, get an external IP address, but that's not going to be scalable. And data centers are kind of like nah anymore. I mean, I assume you guys are on like Azure or AWS. I would
AWS.
assume.
We
Yep.
a lot of so we try to be multi-cloud capable, right? So the solution itself can run on any cloud, but AWS is a great partner of ours, and we do run functionally the majority of our customers on AWS, right?
Yeah, we do the
From a
same.
foundational cloud point, right?
Yeah.
And we really appreciate the partnership that we do have with them. And I think here's kind of the big takeaway, I think, of the AWS plus Amazon, fulfillment services and then ancillary things is that look, Amazon's never going to make a great wine, right? Amazon's not going to make a beer, right? Amazon's not going to make a soda, right? And so
Maybe.
Amazon I mean, they buy companies, right? So
Yeah.
they bought Whole Foods and right and some of these things, and yeah, they've created businesses or bought businesses to try to do some of that and
But that
expand.
would be a right turn to create a soda. That just makes no sense, right? Your point.
Exactly, right? And so, the vendors are partners to that whole model from a fulfillment services standpoint. But to Jeff's point, where it is interesting is that man, like they can fulfill so much now. They have their own trucks, they have their own planes, they have more warehouse capacity than anyone in the business and starting to get up there, right? So, if I'm a UPS or I'm a, United Postal Service, that's where I'm getting concerned, right? Because
Right.
these guys are going to own the facilitation network here pretty quickly, and that's where AWS can, line their piggy banks, right, as far as investments. So it's pretty interesting there. But I think what's nice is that when you think about a wine and spirits distributor, or you think about some of these others in these particular verticals, is that we can help them from a regional standpoint and from a state standpoint or from a county standpoint. We plan down to those individual locations for them so that they know that distribution center in Raleigh, North Carolina is going to do so much demand for this particular product, and they don't have to then look at it, in a holistic and break it down very difficult, right, in a spreadsheet for them. They can see exactly what's going on for that product at that location and plan very granularly, right, to help them with that business. And in a situation like wine and spirits, we have, you know, uh, transit laws and state laws and all these different pieces.
Yeah.
This is an extremely helpful tool set for them.
Yeah, that's a beverage distribution is a weird per state type of thing for sure.
Yep,
And
totally.
obviously it's heavily regulated. So to end off, I guess, maybe it's more Ken, but what's the next big thing in your industry? Like, Chat GPT, I'm sorry, Copilot just came out with uh, Gen AI self-healing in their new Power Automate RPA, and I thought that was like, oh my God, they're self-healing, and you can talk to the bot and things like that. I mean, like, is there anything groundbreaking that you could come out with that people in the industry would be like, oh my God, this is like nobody else does this? Is there anything like is there a Pandora's box like that where you can pull something out and go, I won this demand planning inventory management type space. What's next for you guys?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And we've all begun, right? I think the majority of people at least know of what ChatGPT has done or what Copilot has done, right? From a natural language interaction with an AI. I think the biggest thing for us right now is continuing to drive different degrees of automation for the customer, but never losing that trust in the data and in the operational flow that the customer needs to execute, right? So we're not quite ready for, say, I'm gonna have a chat bot, right? And I joke, I don't know if you remember Clippy, right? Back in the
Yeah,
day,
oh yeah,
Clippy.
the little paperclip in
Yeah, the
Office. Yeah,
paperclip, right?
yeah,
So, I mean, call that like ChatGPT or Copilot 1.0, right? And then they moved to Cortana in
yeah.
Microsoft, and they got some other, back to the whole gaming thing, right? For your Halo
Right.
fans out there,
It's
right?
funny.
So,
Yeah, Halo.
yeah, yeah, with Cortana,
Doom.
right? And
Yeah.
so, anyways, that is something. What we're trying to do is, as a user, is we're trying to query something and then we want to get a result, right? And what ChatGPT or Copilot provides is it provides now finally a natural language way of us to ask a question and then get a queried response, right? And what's nice about these generative tools is that the generative tools can go into the data, they can make a rationalization because they've been trained, and then they can come back and give you, say, a chart, right? Or I can get a table of data, right?
Mhm.
And we're working on use cases to do that, right, from a business intelligence standpoint. But also today we have that built in already from an automated workflow standpoint, which is a degree of AI, so that the user can trust exactly what data is coming from the system, right? And I think we've all heard of hallucinations before, right? AI
Yeah.
hallucinations.
I started hearing about that. It's yeah.
Yeah. And so what essentially that means is that unless that AI is constantly trained, you could go ask it, hey, can you give me last month's inventory report for the North Carolina region, and specifically give me a breakdown of what was sold in Raleigh, North Carolina, right? I could go ask it that in just that plain speak, and then it might give me back the right data. It might give me back 90% of the data. It might give me back only 20% of the data, right? And in today's workflows, a planner can't get 20% of the data for sure and can't
That'd be
really
a mess.
operate very well on 90% of the data. And so the transition that we're going through is we've got to get to the explainable point where these AI systems can come back and generate something that's 100% correct that my CFO can be okay with. And so in reality, a lot of this is just the
It's not
technology
there
still
yet.
has
It's
a way
what
to
you're
go.
saying, right?
Yeah,
It's just not
yeah,
trustable. That it's not the Gen AI is just not trustable. And I've seen that conversational prompts by the
yeah,
buyer asking specific questions about, what's the demand for this particular office, this product, and getting specific results back. Clearly, we're seeing that on the AP side and our AP automation. What's the cumulative total of all the invoices I paid to this vendor over this period of time? And usually you'd have to go to a report, run the report, and here you're just asking. So you see that as a viable option. The issue is that that data you can't really trust yet because it's just not prime time. I mean, again, a
yeah,
lot of these bots, even the chat, we're on 4.0, but the reality is we're so early on in the game that it's just, and to your point, listen, if you don't have trust from your customers and the data, then the whole thing falls apart. And
exactly.
so to introduce technology that really just isn't there yet, and again, every week it's something new, like, oh, it does this. I mean, nothing's stable right now, and as it relates to Gen AI, then I could get into a whole bunch of things on, they just released 4.0 mini and small language models are now overpowered.
Yep,
Anyway, there's so even that nobody can agree on, right? Because the
yep.
energy costs and everything. So that's interesting to hear that, it sounds like the professional services and the Jeffs and the Kens of the world that are at Blue Ridge, you guys just know the market so well, and you know the questions to ask, get the right data and clean data, and outputting of accurate data is the most critical thing. And any type of technology, it sounds like you already have a lot of that already built in, and it wouldn't help at this point. It might make it a little worse and less trustworthy. Is that fair to say?
Certainly
In the
introduce
short,
some different risks, right?
yeah,
Right.
Jeff. Yeah, if you want to talk to some of those risks,
Well,
and
and
then
I
I
do
can tell
believe
you
that we
what we
live in
are
the
doing.
real world, right, Ken? I mentioned earlier, we have to live in the real world. So AI, there's a lot of the theoretical benefit that it could bring, but is it based in reality,
Yep,
Right.
right?
yep. And here's the thing that we do see that in the short term is super powerful for the SLMs and the LLMs of the world is that they're great at going and fetching information that's written, right? And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it almost like a support tool, right? Where you can go and let's say, I want to do something powerful within Blue Ridge, right? So I want to go and do a cost of service analysis, right? But maybe I don't know how to do that. Maybe I forgot my training that occurred, 2 months, 6 months, a year ago, right? And I want to go and execute that. Well, I can go into an LLM or an SLM, right? And I can ask it that question, and then it can help train me, right? It can go fetch that document, or it could go give me a summarized answer to that document, and that is explainable, and that is something that is trustworthy that the user can experience. That is powerful for them from a support standpoint. So we see that explainable AI in those methods is prime time and ready, right? That's how people. I mean, I'm using
But the
ChatGPT.
prediction stuff is what you
It's
want.
not
You
quite
want,
there yet.
yeah.
Yeah,
So what you're saying is like that predictive, the data's not written yet. There's historical data, but
yeah,
what do you make out of it? Right. So that's just not there yet. Yeah.
yeah.
Interesting.
It'll get there eventually, right? But I mean, I would say that from a true value standpoint, we're probably sitting 2 to 3 years away, right,
Yeah.
from a lot of these.
Hey, and 20 years would be, holograms and be able to transport like Star Trek.
Yeah,
It's unbelievable what can happen.
yeah.
Well, so I know we're kind of we're out of time, but this was super enlightening for me. I mean, again, if anybody's interested, Blue Ridge, your website was at blueridge.com.
Blue
Blue
Ridge
Ridge
Uh,
Global.
Global.
BlueRidgeGlobal.com. And then certainly look up Ken Carpenter and Jeff Jatcko on LinkedIn. Great guys to reach out to if you want to learn a little bit more about supply chain, inventory management, demand planning, all the such. And then PIF's an integration partner of you guys. So if you need data, we can get you the data using our bots and our other technology. So, guys, thank you so much for your time. Um, we'll post this on YouTube and LinkedIn and Spotify, and hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll be in touch. Thanks so much,
Thanks, Brent.
guys. Yep.
Thanks,
Bye bye.
Brent.
Awesome.
Have a good